Hello and welcome to 5.3b, the second part of the break-even analysis. This is looking at topic 5, operations management, and I'll encourage you to have a look at 6.11 up to 7.31 for some reading. It's good to do 5.2 first before you get into 5.3. Alright, let's jump straight into it. I've got the same summary sheet from 5.3a. In this one you'll find a bit more math to get into it. I haven't included all of the math stuff, but down here, this is the most important bit, I suppose, for the HL area. Why break-even analysis is good and bad if they give you that sort of 6-mark question. It's going to be, again, going to be some declarative stuff to go through with the knowledge and a whole bunch of skills to help you work each of the stages out. Okie dokie. I got the same videos from last time at 5.3a. Really good to get into this one and this one. This one particularly for the HL section. And when you got time, have a look at the Lego section for Mega Factories. Still love this series, I reckon it's great. Alright, what do I have to do for the end of this? Can you graph it? Can you do all the math? Particularly when there's changes in price and cost. So if the price changes or the costing changes, how does it actually affect the gradients and the break-even points? And I'll show you a bit later on graphically how it all comes together. Can you calculate the output level when they give you a target profit or target level of revenue? It's a bit of the harder maths. The formulas aren't too bad, but they don't show you the formulas on the formula sheet. You just have to know them. And then lastly, for 6 marks, can you analyze basically about a break-even analysis, why it's good to use and why it's bad? What are some of the assumptions behind it? Let's get straight into it, I got the same definitions from 5.3, and I'll just go through them pretty quickly for you. The BEP, the break-even point, is where TR equals TC. The chart is all based around trace, so your title, your ruler, axes, costs and revenues, and your even point. Get down those critical 5 so you can get your 5 or 6 mark questions. Profit and loss are the regions. If you go right at the break-even point, you're getting your profit. If you go left at the break-even point, you're getting your loss. Margin of safety is your level of demand minus your break-even quantity. Really useful for your samples and your MUDA and your capacity utilization. Your levels of sales, level of demand. What's your expected sales? Usually just stated in the question for you. Like when you see your exam stuff, they'll just tell you this is the LOD. And lastly, your profit. This is the best formula for going through remembering it all. I've got some other formulas we're going to have a look at a bit later on, but for most of the questions on an SL bracket, moving into the HL areas, just know this one. It really helps out a lot. Okay, if we look at the graph here, we're going to have a look at the changes in revenues and costs. So what happens when you increase revenues or decrease revenues, and what happens when you increase costs or decrease costs? And I've taken this out of the Paul Hoying textbook, and Paul does a great job. He just does a really good simplified version, so I've modded it for myself to help it explain for you guys. Alright, so if you increase the costs, funnily enough, the break-even quantity actually increases. And you can see here how you've actually shifted up. We've moved up an actual shift along. Note here the break-even quantities actually increased because the costs have increased. And you can see it reflected within this point here. If you get an increased revenue, you're actually going to cause the break-even quantity to decrease, and it'll look like this. Notice how the point shifts across as well, but now the gradient's actually gone a lot higher because you're earning more money for the more output that you make. Both of these things work in the vice versa sense. So if you decrease your revenue, you're actually going to shift to the right rather than shifting to the left. And if you decrease your costs, you're going to shift across as well. Just know it seems to sort of go inverse in your mind. You're sort of thinking if I make more money, it should shift to the right, yeah? And if I control my costs, it should shift to the left. It just goes in the inverse sort of way of thinking. It's very rare. I don't know if I've seen any IB questions that ask you to sort of look at this, but it's part of the syllabus, so it may pop up if you had to do it on a graph. Basically, you'd have to draw 2 graphs and show how the point has moved. Alright, what's some of the limitations with the break-even quantity and the break-even analysis? Basically, it assumes all the revenues and all the costs are going to be linear. They're going to be the same. See how they're lines and they just seem to follow a constant sort of linear fashion? There's no sort of like this hyperbole sort of things or this exponential growth. It just assumes everything's going to be linear all the time. So if you're going over the whole month and you get your total fixed costs, yeah, that's going to be the same. But then a sale's going to be this constant line growth as it goes across, or is it going to go a really steep and then jagger across like this? But when you mash it all together, it then goes into a nice even line. Do you really think that all your sales are going to be linear at all stages through? And do you reckon your raw materials and your variable costs are going to be linear, nice and going along? Is it always going to be like that? So that's one of the limitations of the break-even quantity in the charts. It also assumes you're going to sell everything. You've put out like a plan of where you think is going to happen in the month. The only cost you can probably be certain you have to pay is your total fixed costs. If you don't make anything, because no one wants to buy anything that you're doing, your variable costs are going to change. It also assumes that there's going to be no big impacts on your business. Your workers are always going to be there, your machines are always going to run on time, and your marketing plan was successful and everyone loves what you're doing. Your sales forecasting was accurate in a sense. One of the big things is it ignores all the non-quantitative stuff. So anything to do with, say, the internals, like the way your managers or your shareholders, the internal stakeholders might be feeling, sick days, absenteeism, all the motivational parts, it assumes all those things are constant, that everything's going to work out. It also assumes that the external pressures, or your staple stuff, is going to be constant as well. Nothing's going to change dramatically. Think about the exchange rates. When the exchange rates fluctuate up and down, how's that going to impact on your costs? Let's say new trends with new technology pops up. What about a flood? What about an earthquake? What about a hurricane? All of those things could knock out the power in your business and everything's just going to be all over the place. So basically it's a good plan, it gives a good idea, but it assumes a lot of things are going to happen. Alright, let's get into some procedural stuff here, and we're going to look at target profit and the level of output. Note on here, this formula is not given to you on your formula sheet, you just got to know it. It's basically the same thing as you'll see here with a fixed cost over contribution, but you add your target profit into the same line as your total fixed costs. So I've even made a little picture with a diagram here for targeting just to be stupid. But we'll do the maths now, yeah? Alright, so if I get a target profit of 25, total fixed cost of 200, and contribution of 50, if I chuck that into the math here for you, I add the 200 plus the 25, so I'm getting my 225000 over my 50, and I end up getting 4,500 units. It's basically the same thing as the formula before, but you add in the target profit, and that'll change things up a little bit. What's it going to do? It's going to make the number of units you have to achieve higher in a sense. Alright, this one here is like your break-even revenue, and look how happy this guy is. He's super stoked, he's making a bucket load of cash. When you look in the textbooks, it's aimed at like real estate agents and commission-based people, so they know how much revenue they have to make before they start to break even. I can talk about how many hours I have to work, for instance, to actually get the kind of money I'm hoping to achieve. So it can help out with like your inflows part with your working capital cycle. This formula is not given to you, and it just looks completely different to all the stuff you may have seen. Get your total fixed costs, and it's going to be 1 minus your variable divided by your price. How does that look like in the formula? So if I give you variable costs here, your fixed costs on top of your 60 and your unit by your 30 ends up looking roughly like this. Note on this one here, this is a bit messy in your calculator. You may have to put 2 brackets to make it look nice and neat. But what does it say to this guy here? If he goes through and he wants to cover his 60, and this is his prices he's hoping to put in his structures, he's going to break even roughly at 120,000 revenue. Good guide. Helps you work out to plan and get things ready for the future. I haven't seen any questions like this on any papers that they've come through, but it could pop up because it's part of the syllabus. Alright, I'm going to go through some inductive reasoning. So using the numbers, what can you draw from that is a dole thing. So I've got product A, B, C and D, and I've got down the side here total fixed costs, and this time I'm introducing a target profit and what's an acceptable break-even quantity. So the manager might say, look, this is what we believe we want to do for production levels, and then we can work out what the recommendation is at the bottom. So I'll give you all the numbers here. Feel free to pause it now. Cool. If you've worked out all the maths and everything else, we'll go through. So with your break-even quantity, I won't go through the maths in great detail. I'll do that in the next question going along. But the break-even quantity is popping up at your 3333. This is much less than the acceptable break-even quantity they're hoping to get. But when you bring the profit into it, you notice your break-even quantity is actually increased up to now 4,000. So you might say at this stage here, this is actually less than what we were hoping to do. Our break-even revenue is at 33,000 and 333. Overall recommendation, I'd probably on here be saying no. This is not the thing that we want to do, so we'll put a cross on that one there. Please note the crappy nature of my cross. Up on here, if we follow through with the rest of them, so when I get my 20,000, meets the break-even quantity they're hoping to do. Yes, we can also get that with the profit, and that's our break-even revenue. These are all within acceptable boundaries, so we'll say yes to that one. With this one here, if you follow through the maths, your break-even quantity is going to be your 6,000. This is going to be less than what your acceptable break-even quantity you're hoping to do. So your break-even revenue is going to be tough to achieve. So we'll put a cross for that one there. I'm getting better at crosses, I hope. And lastly, with product number D, if we go through and have a look, here, 4,000 we're hoping to achieve, 3,000, and with our desired profit, it's going to end up being even higher to get. Our break-even revenue is going to be 30,000. So overall, definitely not going to follow through. If you were to recommend through inductive reasoning, you'd be aiming at product B as the product they should be continuing with. It'll allow them to meet their break-even quantity targets. It'll also be able to meet their break-even quantity, and that's the revenue they're going to have to get before they break even. Go with product number B. Alrighty. On here, I'm just going to jump back to my different pointer again. This is sort of like the exam style questions they can give, and given this hasn't really been asked in the past properly, I thought I'd just chuck one down for you to have a practice at. Feel free to pause it now and work through the math. Alright, we'll have a look. So my break-even quantities, if I go through, we've got 2,000, and I'm going to be dividing by my contribution. So my 5 minus my 3, I'm going to have 1,000. On here, break-even quantity right now is not what they're looking for. If you add on the target profit, so you're going to have 3,000, and you do your 3,000 divided by 2, you're going to get 1,500. So the break-even quantity isn't being met with the Sundays right now. And if I have a look down at my notes quickly, if I work through the break-even revenue, it'd be 2,000 divided by 1 minus 3 over 5, and I end up getting 5,000. So you have to get 5,000 break-even to get your revenue in. With the cones as I go through in here, we've got your 2,500 divided by 2.5, so I'm going to be 1,000 again for my target, for my break-even quantity. But if I add my profit into it, I'm now going to get my 4,000. And if I look down at my notes, if I add on my profit to it, my break-even quantity with my profit is going to be 1,600. So this is actually acceptable for the break-even quantity they're hoping to achieve. If I get my break-even revenue, 2,500 divided by 1 minus 5 divided by 7.5, and I get 7,500 on there. So if I go through and have a look now, I've done my break-even quantity, my BEQ profit, and my break-even revenue. At this stage, it's looking like, if I had to do it, this one's not the way to go. Getting better at my crosses, and this is the right way to do it. So if I was going to go for my full 8 marks, first of all, I want to be defining what my actual strategic goals are going to be. So in this business here for the Dorset Ice Cream Company, they're going to use a thing called the break-even analysis, which is determining at what point the business starts to become profitable. In the case application, we'll be looking at this in the cases of Sundays and cones using the math that's been, the figures being supplied, and we'll apply the math to it. Based off the figures, the Sundays do not present an acceptable break-even quantity, as in they're lower. They're actually doing it at 1,500, which is 500 units less than they were planning on doing. With the cones, they had to do 1,000, and they had 1,600, so they're 600 above. Why is this a good thing? Well, it helps them plan for the future. It also helps them plan their production schedules. However, some of the limitations behind this is that it assumes all these growths will be linear and constant. It also ignores Stepple and some of the external pressures placed on it. It also ignores some of the internal things and assumes that workers are always going to be there and be motivated 100% of the time. Overall, the recommendation of doing this would be to aim at doing the cones and moving away from the Sundays. this sort of product here seems to be the better choice for the Dorset Ice Cream Company. That's the recommendation I'd make. Okay, today have a go at doing the worksheet you'll find below. I haven't included a lot of the HL stuff in there, but the idea is if you can definitely do the SL stuff, the HL stuff hasn't been covered in great detail. You have to know the limitations mainly for the marks that have come up in the exam papers. Have a go at your textbook stuff and you'll see some more of those HL type things, and read over the notes I've got in the description bar below. Can you graph a break-even chart, doing the math behind it, and do you reckon if they gave you new figures that you could draw another chart on top of your existing chart to show how it's shifting and the break-even point is actually moving up when you get the costs moving, and it might be moving down when the revenues change as well? Do you reckon you could actually work out now the target profit using the target profit formula? So if you had your total fixed cost and you added on your target profit divided by your contribution, could you now work out the output from that? And using your level of revenue part, so if you had your fixed costs and your 1 minus your variable divided by your price, do you reckon you could do that as a formula? This hasn't been asked that much, but it could be asked in a sense. The last bit of the assumptions with the break-even chart. So your linear assumes everything's the same, it ignores stepple, and it also assumes your internal practices will be 100% at full capacity. Is this the best way to plan, or does it just give a guide? To finish off, I'm just going to re-go through your extension stuff you may have seen in 5.3a. Have a look at Graham Bell and his influence on Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, the big financial guru, who's made something like $50 billion. And also, why is the margin of safety often written in percentage forms? If you want to go back through the fundamentals, have a look at the tutor to you and the biz ed stuff. But I hope you've got some stuff out of this one today. And that's it from me from 5.3, and I'll see you again in 5.4 in quality assurance. See you around. Bye-bye.